get new behaviors of the drivers, and we're staying on top of it. Thank you.
I saw Mayor Clayton.
Thanks, Chair Bressy. That segued well in regards to traffic engineers. Obviously, I'm not possibility of, was there consideration given on 97A Street and 101st Ave to have yield signs as opposed to stop signs? I drove it this morning. Nobody is stopping. It's a, take a left at the Royal Bank, cut through, cut around, and the traffic's just going. And so I wondered if there was considerations given at yield signs there as well as 101st Ave and Resources Road.
Okay, so the yield sign would be northbound on 97B Street.
97A Street, northbound, just kitty corner to Rotary House.
There's a yield sign northbound.
No, there's a stop sign.
There's a stop sign.
And I wondered if could be consideration given for yield signs.
I will take that back because would be easier.
There's no, yeah, okay. As well as at 101st Ave and Resources, because the traffic that's coming off 101st Ave turning left has a light. The traffic that's turning right on 101st Ave going northbound on Resources, there's not a conflict of traffic there, and people aren't stopping anyways because it's just so backed up. So basically at Aberdeen Center when people are taking a right, there's a stop sign currently. Right. Yeah. 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 Okay. Well, it doesn't quite align, right? But anyways, there's the stop sign and then there's a stoplight. So if you could just review that. You mentioned that the south side businesses, their storefronts will be open on Monday. Will there still be some north side businesses that their storefronts aren't open, and what does that look like?
Basically, what happened is they started on the south side, and as they complete the excavation on the south side, then they move to the north side. So that will take a while longer to get the north side. The way it was explained to me, they will start on Monday building the gravel base from CIBC basically eastward. At the mid-walk to get over to
Okay, perfect. Thank you for that.
Thank you. A question I had was about parking. I know that we took out meters throughout the downtown core and we haven't had any paid parking, and it was waiting till phase 4 to have the conduits and all that in. What's the current status and thinking behind what the future of parking downtown is going to be?
That is basically out of my control. I do not. I know that we have placed conduits for those. I might defer to Chris.
Yeah, Mr. Manuel.
Certainly, I can speak to that. So at the onset of the downtown project, we had envisioned a kiosk-based system similar to what you'd see in Edmonton or Calgary. That being said, the parking industry is changing, as well as we now have experience with our interim measures as around no fee-based limited duration parking. So those are all informing some opinions on our side. So I think the plan is this fall, in conjunction with engineering services, transportation, enforcement services, to internally have further discussion and then strike up conversation with the Downtown Association about what the future exactly looks like. As Monty had mentioned, we have conduits ran that give us flexibility to do various things, but I don't think we've landed on a position that we should go with a kiosk system.
Great, thank you. And will that be an eventual council level decision, or will that be an administrative level decision, at least as the process is currently envisioned?
No, it'll certainly be a council decision.
Great, thank you. Are there any further questions? Excellent, well, thank you for the update. We appreciate it. And that brings me to Director's Service Area Report, and today that is Ms. Donnelly.
Thank you. And through the chair, I've got some feedback from some departments, and economic development indicated that the DIG program that they're doing is receiving inquiries. They're creating a one-page information sheet for each grant, and that can be easily circulated in response to these inquiries, and we'll be sending those out to industry. They've also started or restarted the business visitation program and look forward to connecting in person with the business community. And they also mentioned that GP's entrepreneurial spirit remains strong over the last 3 weeks. We've welcomed 23 new businesses to the city. The other department update is from Engineering Services, and the 2021 slope repair program tender, which includes 4 sites adjacent to pedestrian bridges and 1 site adjacent to a vehicle bridge, has been posted. We have closed the slope repair program north of 68th Ave that was in an RFP, and it's not awarded, it is just closed. And then we've also closed the road rehabilitation RFP for 84th Avenue between 100th Street and Resources Road, as well as we're looking at 3 other local road sites that would be part of that program with construction next year. So as far as current construction activities around town that you might be noticing, I'm not going to list them all, but just some highlights. Sidewalks and pathways are actively under construction in Highland Park neighborhood. There's also along 68th Avenue, east of 88th A Street. You've probably seen some excavation for that pathway to go in. As far as road rehab, we have activity on 100th Street, 128th Avenue, north to the city limits. That is including geometric upgrades. Sorry, that's to the north end of the city. We also have work on 108th Street between 100th Ave and Bear Creek Bridge. And then also Kateri between 74th and 70th Avenue. There, like I mentioned, there are a few other local roads and things happening, but those are the kind of the major road ones. The storm improvements in Mount View continue, and the Muscatay Park pedestrian bridge is underway.
Great, thank you. I see Mayor Clayton.
Thanks so much, Chair Bressie. Thanks for the update. There's obviously a lot going on, and as Council had earlier indicated this spring, we knew it would be a heavy construction season, and we're very fortunate to be in a position to be able to do all of this work. I did have a question in regards to road rehabilitation and overlay. Is there any projects of significant size that haven't started yet? I'm just sort of curious for people, the anticipation of more construction heavy load. Is this the max of it at any given time? What does it look like heading into the back to school season?
So through the chair, probably the largest road one that we haven't got started yet is the Park Road in the Smith subdivision. That does include some substantial underground work as well. So that is probably the largest one that hasn't really started. There are some road rehabs, or let me back that up. There's some overlay programs that we did award that when we awarded them, we listed them for completion either this year, if they got to them, or for next year. So for the most part, we're feeling like we're on track. And I think that's probably the most significant ones. That is just that one Smith one that we're.
Perfect.
And that should be going soon.
Okay. Great. Thank you.
Great, thank you. A question I had was the old bypass. I was really impressed by the overlay that got done, how fast and how well that went, and how little it impacted daily commutes. But I'm just curious, now that it looks like the section that's being done is closing up at the hospital, are there plans to continue more of that this summer, or is that as far as we're going this summer?
Through the chair, I believe the portion that we've opened is what we have. It goes up to the bridge. So yeah, we just have the sections that are currently open that you will see. There is a lot of work going on to figure out exactly what the program will look like next year as we continue. So there's a lot of work along that road, and what you see is this year's.
Great, thank you. Are there any other questions? Excellent. Well, we appreciate the update. Thank you. And that takes us to item 3.3, a naturalization update, and that is Mr. DeVries.
Thank you, Chair Bressie. here today to provide an update on the naturalization program, Parks and Transportation. The recommendation from today is that the Infrastructure and Economic Development Committee receive this report for information. Some previous communications on this, so almost a year ago on September 1st of 2020, a similar report was brought forward, and that report was received for information. And then more recently on July 12th, a delegation was present to discuss the care of the Mission Heights Ravine in particular, and it was moved that Council direct administration to refer that discussion to the appropriate standing committee here today. There's a lot of information in this report, a lot of details on the backgrounds, some of the reasons why regarding naturalization. I don't want to grind into that too much, as that has been presented certainly before. Naturalization as a whole does provide a host of ecosystem services that certainly benefit municipalities and their residents. More specifically to the city of Grande Prairie, obviously we're keen on benefits such as slowing water runoff, stabilizing slopes, looking at reduced mowing, which of course helps us improve our operational efficiency, and then again improving worker safety where we can, as well as of course supporting habitat for bird species and pollinators as well. A lot of the work with naturalization at the city of Grande Prairie was spurred in 2019. There was a Parks-initiated review on mowing practices to ensure that the department's reduced resources were certainly being effectively allocated. With regards to the analysis, the initial phase of naturalization certainly focused on areas that were first unsafe or difficult for workers and equipment to maintain, and that includes steep slopes or consistently wet areas. That initial phase of naturalization also included areas such as environmental reserves, some wet and dry storm ponds, as well as drainage ditches. Within that initial scope, the green space area north of Michaelis Boulevard in Mission Heights, which is an area that's just over 3 hectares in size, was also included. There is 1 hectare of that space that is MR on the west side that is still mowed by parks. And then the 2-hectare ravine area, of course, has folded into the naturalization scope. There have been some amendments to that, including now mowing a strip in the center of that ravine, as well as ensuring that there's maintenance on the toboggan hill. That site in particular was naturalized for a variety of reasons. A few key reasons mentioned in the report, the first being that its designation as ER, and that is something that an area that has been designated as ER even pre-1989, as mentioned in the ASP for that area. The steepness of certain slopes, of course, within the ravine also caused concern for operators. There are measured slopes within that area that previously were mowed that are above 30 degrees, which certainly creates some concern from operators and equipment. And then finally, obviously, there's a lot of ecological value within that area already with the naturally occurring vegetation. Areas that do quite well naturalizing are often areas where there's existing tree stands, and those tree stands tend to do their part as soon as mowing operations cease. Since the update on naturalization in 2020, Council has adopted a B City resolution. I will note an error in the report indicating that the resolution was adopted on October 19th of 21, which of course has not happened yet, so that should be 2020. I'll skip through a little bit of the environmental stuff as we've touched on that. Certainly, the social impact of naturalization, naturalization itself can lead to areas appearing unkept at first. I liken it to a bit of an awkward teenager stage where these sites start to develop and get growing. There are certainly some areas that take that better, but we do find that with enough time and a few seasons that these naturalized areas typically fold into the background of the surrounding landscape. As we're well aware, there's several locations within Grande Prairie that have always retained a naturalized appearance, and certainly these areas do provide good value for the surrounding neighborhoods. Now, naturalizing an area that was previously maintained does change recreational uses a little bit of that area, and we certainly respect that. It does provide some new opportunities for some more diverse recreation, including bird watching and berry picking, as well as environmental programming. I've had the opportunity to go with some students actually to the area south of Michaelis Boulevard, which has a fairly consistent naturalized look. And so it was 2 years ago, went with some students from St. Kateri and was able to do some seedling planting in that area and providing a bit of education from our perspective. Regarding stakeholder engagement, Parks is actively working with communications marketing on a naturalization webpage, as well as signage for highly visible areas that are undergoing a naturalization process. We certainly respect and understand that sound engagement will help foster stewardship of these areas. And so by being able to provide good information to local residents regarding naturalization and some of the benefits, then we hope that stewardship does follow as well. We continue to work internally, obviously, with departments such as environmental services and the engineering services departments. We're looking at the fact that naturalization does support initiatives that these departments are involved with, including things like bioengineering, which is fairly significant and a good opportunity for us to continue to fold underneath the naturalization scope. Regarding budget financial, naturalization has helped us optimize 642 hours of staff time in 2020. And we continue to work on reallocating those resources to other frequent areas that require service, high visited and highly visible areas, as well as ensuring that we're able to meet demands from user group requests as they come through. So in conclusion, Transportation Parks has focused effort on facilitating the transition of initially identified naturalized areas from 2020. We're continuing to improving on our conditions, on the city's commitments under B City and other relevant statutes like Policy 212, which is our edible landscaping policy. We will continue working with departments that are supportive of naturalization, obviously internally, and looking for locations that, enhancing locations that provide ecosystem services and allow for ecological functions to perform what may be otherwise costly services. So as we move through, we'll continue to do site-level evaluations in naturalized areas this fall and consider any plans for 2022 that may, of course, be brought forward to Council and the community for consideration. So with that, I will be happy to answer any questions, whether specific to naturalization in general or to the Mission Heights Ravine site.
Great. Well, thank you for the report. And I just think it's worth acknowledging that we've got Adventure Day Camp is getting a council tour chambers or a tour of council chambers after this, and they just showed up in the room. So, hey kids, great to have you here. And whether it's a bug or a feature that you get to see at the end of this council meeting, I'm curious to hear from you. Anyways, are there any questions for Mr. DeVry? Councilor Thiessen.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair Bressie, and thanks for the report, Mr. DeVries. I really appreciate it. And yeah, if you didn't know before about naturalization, I think you the whole tour of how it goes. Some of the concerns that the residents brought up to us around the naturalized area in the Mission Heights Ravine was in regards to wildlife that was maybe habitating in the long grass. Some of the emails and some of the phone calls that I and probably other members of council received was in regards to the coyote population finding a home there and potentially putting their children at risk. How can we address that if we continue on this process?
Through the chair, yeah, it's certainly something that we can look more in depth at. We have other naturalized areas like Crystal Lake that also have local populations of fox in that area. And so it's something that having staff on regular maintenance routes through those areas tend to try and keep an eye on the populations and ensuring that the locations they aren't causing any concern for visitors to that park. So we could potentially do some of that same regular visitation and ensuring that these concerns are addressed for that specific area with regards to the coyotes.
Thank you for that. The other question I had is, so we do maintain some of this lot, so it's 3.09 hectares in size, and we maintain 1.04 hectares with mowing and all that. How much time does it take for us to mow that strip, and how often in the year do we do that?
Through the chair, are you referring to the strip in the bottom or the maintenance area on top, the 1 hectare on top?
It says here in their report 2.05 is designated as ER, so I would imagine that the 1.04 designated for municipal reserve, that we still mow that, it says in the report. How long does it typically take? And yeah.
Through the chair, yeah, typically an hour for that space on the top is the mow time, and then it's on a normal 2-week rotation, as most of the other sites are that would be MR within the city.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Mayor Clayton.
Thanks, Chair Bressie. Thanks for the report, Mr. DeVries. I'm curious in regards to the Mission Heights Ravine. I know when they were a delegation at council, there had been discussion that administration was going to revisit other possibilities. Have we changed anything in regards to our mowing in that area?
Through the chair, we haven't changed anything as of yet. However, we have looked at some options, obviously, to address some of the concerns from the delegation. There is an opportunity potentially to expand upon the strip that's currently maintained, which is about a meter and a half strip in the bottom. After walking the site with a few staff as well and trying to come up with some ideas to try and understand if we can address those concerns, it was discussed that, from Parks mowing operations perspective, the areas of most concern are the slopes, of course. And so we talked about, are there opportunities to potentially expand the mowing that's occurring at the bottom to potentially contour a little more around the existing sort of edges of the forest. So it is something that we could certainly look at, and also trying to think of the comments that were raised from the delegation about the use of the area for its recreation. I would assume, and could definitely check on this, that the recreation would occur more in the bottom versus sort of on the slopes aside from the toboggan hill, of course. So we do have a bit of an option, I'll say, to potentially expand that contouring along the bottom to open up the space somewhat. And what that does is it still allows for some naturalization along the slopes and along the edges. We can still gain some of those benefits as indicated in the report, but also respect the fact that this site has been used for recreation significantly in the past. So I did have some imagery to show if that helps, but if not, we can carry from that.
Sure. Maybe let's see the imagery in that, because I may have a follow-up question.
Just on the play. So through the chair, this is just up by the church, so closer to 84th Ave. So as you can see, this is the current mowed scope, just a small meter and a half strip. And then the red is just showing some of the naturalization that's happening even in the last sort of 18 months, 2 years for this site. So that includes some new growth of trees coming out of the existing stand. And one more. Yeah. And so what we could do is we could contour a little more along the bottom. Go to the next one. Another example of it here. So, yeah. So again, vegetation along the side, and then as you can see, the new undergrowth from this tree stands, and we could potentially propose to move the mowing scope out slightly to again give a little more space to the bottom.
Yeah, go ahead, Mayor Clay.
Thanks, Chair Bressie.
Sorry. Was there?
No, that's fine.
Sorry, go ahead.
It carries on through the whole site. I have it all, but that's probably...
No, keep going.
Well, it certainly gives the idea, but again, strip mowed through the middle, and we would continue to potentially build this out. So this is what Parks would mow again. The white lines and the yellow lines is what we could contour out. Still benefiting, as you can see, not going right up to the edge of the bush, but giving a little more space for those local residents to enjoy that from the recreational perspective that they have.
Yeah, I really appreciate what you've shown here. I think that that is significantly more than we were doing. I agree. The slope stabilization is obviously a concern, and the residents that I spoke to of the area, primarily in the bottom of the ravine, there want to be able to walk their dogs, throw a ball, that kind of thing, be with their kids, and I think that really creates a connectivity between the neighborhood and the residents of the area. I don't know if you or Mr. Carroll, like, if you're going to just do this, are you looking for direction? Like, what's next?
Through the chair, we could certainly go and do it. We could also be directed, I guess, either option. And we're, I guess, from our perspective, we're certainly comfortable with it. We see that, when we zoom out and look at the macro impact of naturalization, I think it would be a bit, inappropriate for us to zoom in so much on a specific, width of mowing within one specific site. I think that for the reasons established in the report, that naturalization across the community continues and will continue to benefit the community at large. So we're flexible in this site in terms of expanding that a little bit to try and meet in the middle, if you will.
So I guess maybe another way to ask that is, if council gives no direction to, or if, sorry, if committee and council give no further direction other than just receiving this for information, what's going to happen in the site?
Well, through the chair, we'd probably maintain it as is, but if there's direction, maybe that would be more prudent, and then we could shift into the what's proposed, I guess.
Great, thank you. And then I guess one more just process question is, if there were members of committee that wanted to give direction for that contour mowing, I'd assume that's direction that would have to be recommended to council, like since it would have operational budget impacts, we'd have to recommend council give that direction. I'd assume committee couldn't make that direction.
Mr. Carroll, do you mind just coming up to the presenters table so those who are watching could hear you? Thanks.
Thanks, and through the chair, certainly the operational impacts will be minimal. So there won't be an extra ask for equipment or personnel to do this. It will be just something that we could handle with existing resources because it's only a minor adjustment to the plan that we mow right now.
So would it be within committee's authority to give direction like that, or would it have to go to council? To be safe, maybe we do it through council if there's a member of the committee that wants to do that.
Through the chair, so yeah, any direction that we get, we certainly will carry out. And like I said, it could be something that whether it will happen this year because we're kind of at the latter part of the season right now, and we may get one more cut in there. And the grass is obviously pretty dry, so there's not a lot going on. But it could be implemented into our mowing program quite easily.
Great. Thank you, Mayor Clayton.
Thanks, Chair Bressie. I guess my question, Mr. Carroll, without revisiting the naturalization plan and 2021 plan, can we just do this? I mean, do you really want committee to get into the operational sort of visiting of a naturalization plan? I mean, there's been discussion here. You've made consideration. Can we just consider that since there's probably one more left that we'll look at it for this year, and then next council may have an appetite to revisit naturalization then, but for now can we just consider that it's operational, and as you as the manager, as that department will take care of it?
It's through the chair, sure. It could be a direction that we go because we're still basically upholding the reasons why we're naturalizing in the area, just expanding the scope that we're servicing. So the effect is on our broader naturalization plan is very minimal. So it could be we could direct our staff to carry out the expanded mowing in that area quite easily.
See Councillor Friesen.
Thank you, Chair Bressie. I'm not on the committee and can't make a motion, but I'm hoping that a motion will be made here. And the reason why that is important is because last year we all heard that the neighborhood was dismayed that the mowing discontinued, and we talked about it and thought that we came to the understanding that it would that the mowing would be resumed down there, and in fact it wasn't, leading to the delegation coming to us again. And that's fine. That's when it just gets kind of lost from discussion to operations, and I understand that, but I don't want that happening again, and I'm hopeful that this committee will make a motion to provide direction to widen the mowing that happens in that bottom part there.
I guess I'll look to committee in if there's any other questions by all means, but also is there anybody willing to make a motion so we can get on with our business? Councillor Thiessen.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair Bressie. I think it would be pretty unanimous across our council table that we want to do what we can to improve not just the neighborhood's experience of the area, but also the natural habitat that it provides the city for ecosystems and all that stuff. So I'm going to just make a motion and open to wordsmithing, if I can. I would move to direct administration to to continue with the mowing of this area in the expanded view as we were shown from Mr. DeVries. So I know it's kind of a weird one. I wrote expanded mowing area, like, so I guess the wider area of the mowing width. It's a horrible motion, and I apologize to the children in the audience. I was really hoping the mayor was going to make this motion because I think we're all on board, but if there's a better way to put it, so you guys know, I think you know.
I can help you if you want.
Thanks, Madam Mayor.
So I would, I suggest, Councillor Thiessen, that your motion be that committee recommend council approve the increase of mowing within the discussed area. I'm not sure exactly what you're calling that area, but as the area as discussed, and if you can fill in the appropriate word. So just like committee recommend council approve the increase of mowing in that area. Thank you.
Thank you for that.
As suggested by administration. Thank you.
I'm okay with that, and thank you for that, Madam Mayor.
Excellent. Well, certainly in order. I'll just look at our recording secretary if she feels she's got it, and she does. So is there any questions or is there any discussion or debate on this motion? And I'll call it to question. Great, thank you. And is there any further business on naturalization, Mayor Clayton?
I would just move that the Infrastructure and Economic Development Committee receive this report for information.
Great. Any discussion or debate? I will call it to question. Great. And that motion carries. So I'll say thank you for the report. And with that, we've got our very last piece of business for the day, and that is setback standards for narrow homes, and that's Mr. DeRoche.
Thank you, Chair Vesey. Let's be sharing my screen here. So in the spring of this year, Council approved land use bylaw amendments to accommodate narrow lot development in the form of single detached skinny homes and townhomes in the residential transition district. However, the amendments didn't include any reductions to the site setbacks or building heights or anything of that nature in order to allow the buildings to continue to follow the same standards as existing buildings and have minimal impact in terms of consistency with neighborhood appearance. After the amendments were approved, Council provided administration with direction to review the standards for yard setbacks between two narrow homes to look at a possible 4-foot total setback and reviewing the requirement for a 20-foot front yard setback. Now, the review went slightly beyond Council's direction in order to give Council a broader view of all the potential site standards that could be adjusted to further accommodate this form of development. And the intent there was to give a full picture rather than only looking at two of the potential solutions to making these housing types more functional and more potential to have them actually develop. So that includes adding examination of the rear yard setbacks, building height, and lot coverage. And so the review included a comparison of standards from 3 other municipalities, so Edmonton, Calgary, and Saskatoon, where this form of housing is accommodated. And the review looked at a number of impacts for each potential adjustment, so that includes impact to parking, consistency of neighborhood appearance, views from adjacent properties, reduction of landscaping and amenity space, and impacts in terms of shadows and access to sunlight on adjacent properties. So in the front yard setback review, we see that Grande Prairie has the largest required setback at 6.1 meters. Calgary has the smallest with 3 meters, allowing for down to 2 meters in some cases, and Saskatoon and Edmonton allow for 4.5. And so the reasoning behind the setback, at least in Grande Prairie, is based, I believe, on our parking stall depth of 6.1 meters. In other municipalities, they don't require as much parking, and they also have smaller stalls, so that impacts kind of a lot of these standards. And so in the case of reducing the front yard setback, the more you reduce it, the more you have some of these impacts. So the main benefit is accommodating a larger square footage for these buildings potentially. So again, the more you reduce the setback, the more square footage you gain. If you reduce the front yard setback at all, you'll lose the opportunity for front parking in Grande Prairie. And so that would force them to put the parking at the rear, which may be detrimental to the idea of creating more family-oriented housing, although in many instances we kind of let the market decide on those types of items. It would detract from consistency of neighborhood appearance, again, depending on the degree to which you reduce it. In some cases, it may impact views from adjacent properties, but it's fairly minimal. And these are areas where you could also have a fence or landscaping, so we wouldn't expect it to be a severe detriment. It would create less front yard space to utilize for landscaping or other uses. And reducing the front yard setback will increase the amount of shadow on adjacent properties. We have the shadow illustration here from the report. I'd like to note that these aren't full shade studies. This is just a quick diagram to show a potential impact, and these vary significantly depending on different aspects of the building, the site, the location. And so these are just illustrations of potential impacts. In terms of side yard setbacks, I only looked at reducing the side yard setback between two narrow homes. And so in most of the other municipalities, there is the opportunity for a reduced setback. And they typically go to 0.75 meters, which creates a 1.5 meter setback in total. Currently, we require 1.2 meters between each property, so 2.4 meters in total, which is a lot larger. And so what the 1.5 meter setback does is it creates a 5 meter space between the buildings that would allow for maintenance. And so if we were to accommodate this reduced standards, we would allow for a potential 19% increase in building square footage. And the only impact would be requiring an easement between the two properties, and there would be little to no impact on the other neighboring properties because it would be similar to something like a semi-detached where there's no setback at all. And so this type of change would increase square footage with minimal impact on the neighborhood. In terms of rear yard setback, it was consistent among all the municipalities. Grande Prairie requires 7.6 meters, all the others required 7.5. And so we did an examination based on a reduction for only a rear attached garage. So that would be only the first level of the building and the garage portion of that building based on what Edmonton allows. And so Edmonton allows a reduction up to 5.5 meters. We did two scenarios. One was 5.5 meters, and the other is 6.1 based on accommodating a parking stall behind the structure as well. And so the review showed that there's really little to no impact on adjacent properties. It may be somewhat inconsistent, but it's behind the building, so it's not going to detract from the overall neighborhood appearance. It does reduce the available space for actual backyards. So if you're thinking you want the type form of housing for families and children playing in the rear yard, that does detract from that. It does also create opportunities, though, for outdoor amenity space on the second level above that portion of the garage. And then we looked at views, and so I provided the view illustrations here, and you can see if you reduce it to 6.1 meters, on the left you see that there's no building protruding into the actual view based on the angles. And then with 5.5 meters, you can see where the side of the building may impact views. This view is actually just looking straight out of the neighboring property with no back wall. So if you factor in a wall and then a window, you're likely not to actually see that at all. And then again, they can have a detached garage back there. They can have fencing. They can have landscaping that would also obstruct the views. And so the other consideration would just be shadows, which would be somewhat minimal. One aspect we looked at is building height. And so we currently allow 2 stories in the residential transition district. The limit of 2 stories isn't specified in terms of what that actually means in height, but typically across the land use bylaw, we measure that as 8.5 meters. So we examined 3 stories based on a 10-meter building height. That's comparable to what Edmonton and Calgary allow. Now, each municipality measures building height in different ways, so that creates some nuances in how we assess this. In the example cases, we just looked at a building with a flat roof, roof to make it a much simpler analysis. Now in the report, I mistakenly wrote that that would increase the square footage by 33%. It's actually 50% increase in square footage. And so that has a significant impact on being able to make a significantly larger home. And what that also does is it increases the viability of having an attached garage, because the attached garage, either at the front or the rear, would take up a significant portion of that ground level. And so adding a third story would help compensate for that. In terms of neighborhood consistency, it would be very inconsistent with a lot of the arterial areas where you tend to see single-story homes. These are mature neighborhoods. And so there's a potential for it to impact things like views and just be out of character for the neighborhood. And then it will have a significant impact on shadows to adjacent properties. So lot coverage, we just looked at lot coverage in terms of if you adjust any of the required setbacks, you're going to have to take a look at the impact on lot coverage to make sure that it's practical to meet lot coverage and these adjusted setbacks. In terms of Grande Prairie, you can see here that with a standard lot that we're looking at, and if we max out all our setbacks, we're at about 70% lot coverage, and we allow up to 45, so there is significant wiggle room there in these setbacks. But these lot coverage also accounts for things like detached garages. And so Saskatoon kind of provides an example of where this may create some confusion. So if you apply all of their setbacks, you end up with the lot coverage of 54%, where only 45% is allowed. So even though you're allowed to have all these lower setbacks, you would have to adjust them somewhere to meet the lot coverage. You wouldn't be able to max out all these minimums. And then parking, not something I ideally wanted to get into, but it seems unavoidable. Grande Prairie requires 2 stalls for each of these homes. In the other cities, they either require none or 1. And that has a huge impact on the practicality of developing kind of a single or narrow detached home, or even row houses. So the other aspect is in Grande Prairie, we require much larger parking stalls than all the other municipalities I looked at. So in the other ones, it's about 5.5 meter depth, and we require 6.1. And the reality is that our parking stall depth allows for someone to park a truck, which is much more common here, whereas theirs is maybe based on a typical car, which is significantly smaller. And so adjusting any of the parking requirements, there may be an opportunity to reduce stall depth for something like that to accommodate these forms of housing. But again, it would be challenging based on the Grande Prairie context and our average number of vehicles per household and typical vehicles. And then parking is the biggest concern we hear from residents when we're talking about infill development in these mature neighborhoods. And so it's something we're very sensitive to any adjustments to. So the recommendation in the report is to receive for information, and I know that doesn't give council a ton of structure in terms of providing a recommendation. The review went far beyond what the actual direction was. So in terms of council's actual direction, reducing the setback between 2 narrow homes seems like a very straightforward option to go with. It has little to no impacts and will significantly increase the viability of this form of development. In terms of reducing the front yard setback, based on the review, I would suggest only allowing for a reduced front yard setback for garages, and that way it minimizes some of those impacts on adjacent properties in terms of neighborhood consistency, shadows, views, and those types of things. And then for further consideration, I would suggest also potentially reducing the rear yard setback for attached garages, allowing up to 3 stories, because that makes a significant difference in the potential square footage in actually building one of these homes, and meeting all the other standards such as parking. And then if we are going to move forward with these changes in the residential transition district, I would suggest applying them to other forms of low density housing, such as single detached homes. And that way, the consistency of neighborhood design, as well as kind of equality of opportunities for development, are somewhat addressed as these areas redevelop. Then it wouldn't just be these types of homes standing out. It would be all new development would gradually kind of fill in and be more consistent. So I thank you for your time, and I'm open to questions.
Excellent. Thank you for the report. Are there any questions? Councillor Thiessen.
I actually have a lot of questions. Sorry, I know you kids are waiting for this, but it's all part of the business. So in regards to our setback standards for narrow lot infill, there was a few things that I had just noted that I thought could be problematic, and you did address some of them on your report, Mr. DeRoche, and I thank you for that. But some that weren't addressed was fire, permeable surface for our underground storm system, and also parking. I had a different idea about garages, I guess. So I'll just start firing off some questions, and we'll see where we go from there. Does administration have any concern with reducing the front yard setback to also reducing the amount of permeable surface that we have for water to flow through, thereby potentially negatively impacting our storm sewer on the road that these houses would be built upon?
So through the chair, in terms of long-term planning, Aquaterra looks at the existing development in mature neighborhoods and more or less expects something to be consistent. So notably on the lot coverage issue. And so adjusting these standards would increase the area of impermeable surface, therefore increasing drainage, which would potentially impact Aquaterra's long-term plans if, and I guess the city stormwater infrastructure, if it is done at a larger scale. And so that would have to be part of, if we were to move forward with pursuing land use bylaw amendments, the greater stakeholder engagement.
Okay. Thank you for that. The other question I have is in regards to fire. So by reducing the side yard setbacks to 0.75 meters per side compared to 1.2 meters, which is essentially eliminating a full meter between each, do we increase our fire risk for the homeowners of these narrow lot homes?
Thank you. Through the chair, this is addressed through building code. So if the setback is reduced, then I would believe that the actual fire standard for those outside walls will be more stringent to address that.
Okay, that's great to hear. Then the other thing, so we were talking about street parking. Or you were talking about street parking, I guess, as far as putting a lane in the back and then having driveways in the back rather than in the front. Now, typically in Grande Prairie, we see our streets get convoluted with cars parking on there. I know we have a lot of 2-car homes, but we also have a lot of 3- and 4-car families in this town as well. So what are some strategies that you thought in developing this on how we can mitigate the amount of street parking in narrow lot homes?
Thank you. So through the chair, to put this into context, these are lots where you could currently build a 3-plex. And so in terms of other types of development, it's comparable in what the actual parking impacts would be. And so when we actually got these into the land use bylaw, we more or less increased the parking requirement, at least for townhomes, because rather than having combined visitor parking, they now require 2 stalls each rather than 1.5. And so for the row houses, we address it through that. And for the single detached, we have the same parking requirement as you would for any other single detached. And so it would be similar to if you built a duplex on that site. It's the same number of stalls required, it's the same impacts. And so we're not treating it differently in terms of other infill development. It's the current standards that are addressing that.
So if a resident purchased the property and instead of building a pad on the back for their vehicles to park or garage, and they just built their fence to the property line, right to the lane, it would probably push them to street parking. Would we mandate that any development of these skinny lot homes that they have parking pads in the back and that they cannot build their fence right to the back property line across the property?
Thank you. Through the chair, they're required to provide 2 parking stalls on the site. Where they provide it is more or less up to them as long as they meet the required site standards. And so if they provide it at the front, then they can fence how they'd like at the rear, but they're still required to provide 2 parking stalls on the actual site.
And would a developer be able to say that our 2 parking stalls are on the street in front of the house?
Thank you. So through the chair, again, you can't use on-street parking to meet your parking requirements. You just can't do that for any form of development in the city.
Okay, and the reason why I'm asking this is largely because when you drive through Westgate or Pinnacle Ridge and you go down their alleyway lanes, there's a lot of houses there that just have like a dirt pad or a gravel pad, and then when they sell the house, the new homeowner comes in and they build a fence and then they just park on the street. We don't require homeowners to have the same standards as I guess our developers do. So there is the potential that parking may be reduced simply by the sale of a house. Am I wrong in that assumption, or?
Thank you, to the chair. So that is an enforcement issue. And so parking at the rear is a challenge in terms of whether or not residents actually utilize it. They are required to, so as part of their development permit, they need to have those parking stalls. They need to be accessible. Whether or not someone actually does that or someone purchases a home and doesn't quite realize the site requirements and changes the landscaping, it would be an enforcement issue after the fact.
Okay, so they wouldn't be able to build a fence across their property line if they chose to?
Through the chair, if the required parking stalls are provided at the rear, they're not allowed to fence, closing off, eliminating those parking stalls. They need to provide those parking stalls.
Okay, and as far as enforcement goes, would we wait for a complaint, or would that be at like the development permit portion of like the fencing?
Through the chair, to my knowledge, it's typically just done on a complaint basis.
Okay, so then I guess just in my final question around parking, then I'm just going to drop it all here, but some things definitely we should all ponder. Going into larger centers such as Vancouver and Montreal, Quebec, and Toronto, I've noticed a lot of these similar skinny style homes, 3 stories in height. One thing that the developers made sure to do was to include parking on an underground parking basis. Have we put in any consideration of that for like a 1-car garage that would be part of the foundation that someone could just drive into?
Thank you, through the chair. They are able to do that under our current standards. There's nothing specifically directing them to do it. It's more of a design option that they can choose to accommodate their parking requirements.
Okay, yeah, thank you very much. I'm done for now.
Great, thank you. Are there any further questions? Is there any business? Councillor Thiessen?
I guess I just have a question. So the recommendation is that the Infrastructure and Economic Development Committee receive this for information. Now, obviously, there's been a lot of work that went into it. So if we just receive this for information, then that we would pass this and put it into our land use bylaw, or is there still work to be done and still council work to be done on this?
Sorry. Through the chair, there is still work to be done on this. If members of the committee would like to see this developed into a land use bylaw amendment, we would need that recommendation.
Okay. Okay, so in heeding that there's still work to be done on this, and I appreciate the work that's already been done. I know that's probably the questions I've asked will be looked into. I would move that the Infrastructure and Economic Development Committee receive this report for information.
Excellent. Is there any discussion or debate on the motion? Mayor Clayton.
Thanks. I will support that motion. I just asked that, it mentions in the report that consultation was not done with stakeholders because it wasn't necessary at this time. But if, councils of the future are interested in expanding on this, I think it's very important for us to have consultation with stakeholders. So thanks.
Thank you. I don't see any other discussion, so I'll call this to question. And that motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Roche, for the report. We appreciate it. And last of all, I will go to Ms. Donnelly for our outstanding items list.
Through the chair, there's 2 items on the list that have now been addressed, 1152 and 1146. I would request, as a result of this meeting, that those 2 be removed. The other item will stay there. It is due in 2022.
Great. So it looks like Director Glavin won't be able to clear a scoreboard. Is there anybody willing to make a motion?
Yeah, I can make the motion. You want on the board? All right, I would move that council or committee approve the outstanding items list as amended.
Great. Any discussion or debate? Not seeing any, I will call it to question. And that motion carries. And with that, I will call this meeting adjourned. Thank you, everyone.